Are you ready for a historical journey? I hear yes. The sun rose over the Greek hills like a molten coin, spilling light across the rugged terrain, gilding olive groves, and glinting off the distant sea. In 776 BCE, Greece was a patchwork of city-states, each holding its pride, each devoted to its gods, yet all connected by shared culture, language, and the promise of the sacred games. Roads wound like silver threads through valleys and over ridges, and along these roads moved a river of humanity, flowing toward Olympia, the valley that would host the first Olympic Games. To travel these roads was to step into a living mosaic of life, of anticipation, of ordinary people and extraordinary ambition. Before continue, please do not forget to subscribe and like for more. The journey began before dawn for many, when the air was still cool, and dew clung to the grass and to the leather straps of sandals. Travelers emerged from towns and villages, their silhouettes long and hunched beneath the weight of burdens, baskets of figs, sacks of grain, amphorae of wine, jugs of olive oil. Merchants called out, their voices rising in song-like cadences to advertise wares: fresh figs, honey as sweet as the gods, oil pressed this morning from the finest olives. Children scampered ahead, barefoot, laughing, tripping, their feet leaving prints in the damp earth, while animals, goats, donkeys, and oxen, brayed and snorted, carrying goods or being led gently by their owners. Musicians wandered among them, playing flutes and lyres, their melodies winding through the air, twining with the scent of wild thyme and the dust of the road, softening the harshness of travel with beauty and rhythm. The roads themselves were alive. The uneven stones, worn smooth by centuries of feet, told stories in every groove. Travelers' sandals slapped against them in uneven rhythms, and carts creaked and groaned under the weight of goods. The wind carried the scent of the sea from miles away, mingling with the smell of fires from early morning hearths, smoke curling lazily into the sky. Birds cried from olive trees, and the cicadas, already awake in the warmth, droned a constant background hum. Every step forward was a sensory experience: the heat of the sun, the scent of baked earth, the dust that clung to skin and clothing, the taste of bread pressed into travelers' hands. Along these roads were the people of Greece, each a small story, a living fragment of the culture that made the games possible. There were the farmers, hands calloused from planting and harvesting, who walked slowly, carrying only what was necessary, yet whose eyes were bright with the anticipation of the festival. There were the artisans, bringing bronze statuettes and carved wooden implements, hoping that the crowds of Olympia would purchase their wares. There were families, parents guiding children, the youngest clutching at figs or small trinkets, wide-eyed with wonder. There were athletes too, young men striding purposefully, bodies already bronzed by the sun and oiled, muscles rippling as they walked. Each step they took was preparation, each glance a reminder that they would soon compete not just for victory, but for honor and immortality. The landscape itself told stories. Rolling hills gave way to olive groves, their leaves silver in the sunlight, rustling with every passing breeze. Small streams cut through the earth, reflecting the sky and the movement of travelers, carrying cool water to quench parched throats and water-tired animals. The occasional grove of cypress trees offered shade, their dark silhouettes standing in contrast to the brightness of the fields. From the hills, one could see distant towns clinging to mountainsides, their white walls shining like beacons, temples rising above them, their columns catching the first light of dawn. Even the rocks themselves seemed alive, weathered faces carved by wind and rain over centuries, witnesses to generations who had walked these paths before. And everywhere, the conversation of travelers mingled with the natural sounds. Merchants haggled over prices, children shouted to each other, travelers recounted tales of previous games, of victories and defeats, of heroes and gods. Some spoke of the great Heracles, whose strength and courage had inspired generations, others of Pelops, whose fateful chariot race would be remembered for centuries, still others of Achilles, whose swiftness and wrath had shaped history itself. These tales were not mere entertainment, they were lessons, guiding the young, reminding all of the standards by which Greeks measured courage, skill, and honor. As the travelers approached Olympia, the anticipation grew almost tangible. The valley lay ahead, hidden until the last hill was crossed, a secret of the landscape revealed in a single breathtaking view. From above, one could see tents dotting the fields like colorful flowers, smoke rising from countless fires, glinting of bronze and marble from statues and temples, the dark green of olive groves interspersed with the brighter greens of cultivated fields. The river, winding like a silver ribbon through the valley, reflected the sun in dazzling flashes. The air was thick with expectation, as though the land itself held its breath for the events to come. Among the travelers, the athletes became more deliberate in their movements, walking with the focus of those who understood the stakes. Each man carried the weight of training, discipline, and family expectations. Their muscles flexed under the strain of long journeys, and their eyes were set forward, imagining the stadium, the wrestling grounds, the pancration field, imagining the feel of victory, the taste of olive wreaths, the thunder of applause and admiration. They walked with reverence, understanding that the games were not merely contests of strength, but of spirit, a bridge between mortal effort and divine witness. The merchants, too, quickened their pace, eager to reach the heart of Olympia, where their wares would find an audience. Bronze figurines were polished, woven fabrics adjusted, jugs checked for cracks, honey jars dusted. Each hoped for recognition, not merely profit, for to be admired by the people gathered here was a form of immortality. Parents guided children, instructing them to behave, to observe, to learn the ways of ritual and reverence. Scholars and philosophers moved slowly, discussing the nature of virtue, the meaning of competition, the balance of body and mind. Everywhere, conversation, movement, and expectation intermingled, creating a current of energy that seemed to pulse from the earth itself. The Valley of Olympia was more than a destination, it was a promise. The sacred altus awaited, the grove of Zeus, temples, altars, and statues that had grown over generations. Fires were already lit, smoke curling toward the sky in thin columns, mingling with the heat of the morning sun. Here, sacrifices would be made, contests would be held, victories and defeats would be etched into memory. The sacred olive tree, whose branches would provide wreaths for victors, stood tall, a symbol of honor and divine witness. And surrounding it, the people of Greece, citizens, slaves, merchants, priests, and travelers from distant lands, would converge, their voices rising and falling in a symphony of anticipation. The first night before the games was quiet yet alive. Tents flickered with torchlight, shadows danced on walls and ground, the air scented with cooking fires, incense, and the lingering aroma of wild herbs. Travelers lay on the earth, tired yet restless, whispering stories of previous games and of the heroes they admired. Some recounted the deeds of Heracles wrestling the Nemean lion, others of Pelops' daring chariot race, Achilles' speed, and Odysseus' cunning. Even minor local legends were spoken aloud, tales of mortals who had once competed and been honored by the gods. Each story reinforced the anticipation, weaving a rich tapestry of history, myth, and expectation that bound the people to this place and moment. As dawn approached, Olympia itself seemed to breathe. The wind carried the smell of river water and olive leaves, the song of birds, the soft murmur of conversations as travelers awoke, stretching, preparing for the first day of the games. The valley lay quiet yet charged, awaiting the footsteps of athletes, the chants of crowds, the clash of competition. Every rock, every tree, every bend in the river seemed to hum with the weight of what was to come. This journey, long and winding, was not merely physical. It was a passage into a world where time, effort, courage, and devotion would converge. Every step toward Olympia carried history, myth, and expectation. And as the first rays of sun touched the altar of Zeus, illuminating marble and bronze, the travelers, merchants, athletes, scholars, families, knew that they had entered a sacred space where mortal endeavor would meet divine witness, and where the story of human aspiration would begin to unfold. The anticipation was electric. Parents encouraged children to observe respectfully, merchants adjusted wares, athletes stretched and flexed, and philosophers murmured reflections on honor and virtue. Each person present, whether born into privilege or toil, understood that they were part of something greater than themselves, a story that would be retold across generations, a festival where the human spirit was measured not only in strength and skill but in courage, discipline, and devotion. As the sun climbed higher, the valley became alive with movement. Travelers adjusted bundles, called greetings to one another, and laughed with joy and relief at the sight of their destination. Animals drank from streams and rested in the shade, children ran along riverbanks and through groves, and the rhythmic sound of footfalls, carts, and voices combined into a symphony of life. Olympia was no longer a distant promise, it was here, tangible and vivid, ready to receive the thousands who had walked from across Greece. By midday, the first glimpses of the Altis and the surrounding temples could be seen clearly. Marble statues glimmered in the sun, bronze shields and weapons reflected the light, and priests moved with solemnity, preparing altars and sacred implements. The sacred olive tree, central to the crowning of victors, stood proudly, its branches swaying gently in the warm breeze. Fires dotted the valley, already lit for cooking, signaling the presence of the many who had arrived before the main body of travelers. The valley hummed with expectation, a living, breathing testament to the devotion, ambition, and shared culture of all who had come. Evening fell with a slow, golden light, casting long shadows across tents and groves. Travelers gathered around fires to rest, recounting stories of the road, tales of past games, legends of gods and heroes, and dreams of the competitions ahead. Musicians played lyres and flutes, melodies drifting on the warm night air. The valley, already steeped in centuries of devotion, seemed to hum with energy, as if it were alive, aware that in the coming days it would host feats of courage, skill, and spirit that would echo across time. The journey to Olympia was complete, yet it was only the beginning. Every traveler, every athlete, every merchant, and every observer carried within them the knowledge that they had stepped into a place where mortal endeavor would meet divine witness. The sacred valley awaited, ready to witness the birth of the Olympic Games, where stories would be made, legends forged, and history recorded. And as night deepened, the fires flickered, the wind whispered through the olive trees, and the valley of Olympia held its breath, anticipating the first steps of athletes, the first cries of victory, and the first echoes of glory. The morning light spilled across Olympia like liquid gold, igniting every surface with brilliance. Marble and bronze shimmered in the sun, olive leaves glittered with dew, and the soft hum of the river blended with the murmurs of the gathered crowds. Travelers emerged from the trees lining the approach to the Altis, eyes wide with awe, absorbing the sacred space that spread before them. Olympia was no ordinary place, it was a convergence of history, devotion, and human ambition, a space where the mortal and the divine met with every footfall. As one stepped closer to the heart of the valley, the Altis revealed itself in all its grandeur. Temples rose like pillars of eternity, columns carved with precision, adorned with reliefs depicting gods, heroes, and the feats of men who had dared to reach for immortality. Among them, the Temple of Zeus dominated, its massive form both imposing and welcoming, inviting awe and contemplation. The scent of burning incense and roasted offerings drifted from altars, mingling with the crisp aroma of olive groves. Flames leapt from countless fires, their smoke rising in thin columns, carrying prayers and offerings to the heavens. Priests moved with solemnity, preparing altars for sacrifice. Their garments, white with saffron borders, swayed in the breeze as they arranged bowls, knives, and libations. The rhythm of their actions, deliberate and unhurried, carried a reverence that imbued every motion with sacred significance. Wine was poured, grain scattered, and prayers whispered, each act a bridge between human endeavor and divine witness. Even the slightest gesture, the tilt of a bowl, the sprinkle of water, the careful placement of a flame, was a language understood by the gods themselves. Visitors moved slowly through the Altis, eye-scanning statues and reliefs that told the stories of generations. Heroes frozen in bronze and marble seemed almost alive, caught mid-leap, mid-strike, mid-victory. Heracles wrestling the Nemean lion, Pelops leaning into his chariot, Achilles poised with spear and shield, these were not merely depictions, they were mirrors, reflecting the aspirations of those who walked among them. Each observer felt the weight of these legends, as if stepping into their stories, understanding that the games were not only contests of strength but acts of alignment with ideals that transcended mortality. Families gathered near the sacred olive tree, whose branches would later provide the wreaths for victors. The tree's gnarled trunk and silvery leaves spoke of centuries of devotion, of rituals performed and victories honored. Children ran around its base, mimicking the motions of athletes, their laughter echoing against the marble temples, blending innocence with reverence. Merchants set up stalls, carefully arranging jars of honey, woven fabrics, carved figurines, and bronze trinkets. Their voices rose and fell like the tides as they invited travelers to inspect, touch, and purchase, blending commerce with culture in a seamless dance. Scholars and philosophers strolled among the crowds, discussing virtue, honor, and the balance of body and mind. Their voices were measured, thoughtful, rising occasionally above the din to pose questions that drew attentive listeners. "What is excellence?" one asked. "Is it measured in strength, speed, or in the courage to face defeat?" Another responded, pointing to a nearby statue, "Observe Heracles. He did not only triumph in strength, but in the mastery of fear, in persistence against impossible odds." These dialogues, though subtle, echoed the very essence of the games, a celebration of intellect, character, and physical prowess, intertwined in a ritual that elevated all who participated and observed. The air was thick with expectation. Travelers paused frequently, taking in the sights, sounds, and scents. The soft rustle of olive leaves, the gentle gurgle of the river, the distant braying of goats, and the murmur of countless voices combined into a living tapestry. Sunlight glinted off polished shields, bronze helmets, and the gleaming skin of athletes, creating a rhythm of light and shadow across the valley. Dust from the paths clung to feet and sandals, the heat of the day slowly rising, yet no one seemed to mind. Each movement, each glance, each whisper contributed to the growing sense of anticipation that hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Rituals punctuated the arrival of the people. Priests led small processions to altars, offering prayers and sacrifices. They chanted in melodic cadence, their words carrying across the hills, mingling with the wind and river sounds. Each offering, a lamb, a jug of wine, a handful of grain, was carefully selected, an expression of devotion and acknowledgement of the divine. Observers watched silently, understanding that their presence itself was part of the ritual, a recognition that the games existed not only for the glory of men but as acts of reverence for the gods who watched over them. Artists and bards added their own layer of depth to the valley. Poets recited lines from the epic tales of Heracles' labors, of Pelops' chariot race, of Achilles' courage and wrath, of Odysseus' cunning across seas. Musicians accompanied them with lyres, flutes, and pipes, filling the air with melodies that wound through tents, groves, and along riverbanks. Each note, each syllable, each gesture drew listeners deeper into the story, transforming mere entertainment into a conduit for reflection and inspiration. Travelers, tired from their journey, found themselves captivated, transported into a world where past, present, and myth converged. The spatial dynamics of Olympia contributed to its power. The Altis was surrounded by groves that offered shade and contemplative quiet, contrasting with the bustling center where tents, merchants, and athletes gathered. Small streams wove through the valley, reflecting the sky and the movements of the people, providing water to quench thirst, refresh animals, and cleanse the body in ritual or habit. Hills rising on either side framed the valley, creating natural amphitheaters where sounds of voices, music, and hoofbeats could resonate, amplifying the sensation of grandeur and ceremony. Athletes prepared for the events in meticulous detail. Muscles were stretched and oiled, limbs flexed and tested, breath controlled in preparation for the strain of competition. Each motion was deliberate, each pause measured. They observed one another, noting strengths, weaknesses, and technique, while also engaging in rituals of mental preparation, invoking the favor of the gods through prayer, visualization, and symbolic gestures. Some meditated beneath trees, others practiced in the sand, throwing javelins, spinning the discus, or running short distances to hone their timing. Merchants, meanwhile, navigated the tension of commerce and ceremony. They called out their wares in rhythmic patterns designed to draw attention without breaking the reverence of the space. Children, observing their elders, learned not only about trade but about the balance of patience, attention, and persuasion. Scholars debated quietly, observing the interactions of humans, noting patterns, and reflecting on the human desire to honor the divine through excellence. Even the environmental details were imbued with meaning. The wind carried the scent of olive trees, river water, and incense. Sunlight shifted across marble and bronze, creating moving patterns of light that seemed almost intentional. Dust from the paths rose and settled like a living veil over the valley, a reminder that Olympia existed both in permanence and in impermanence, in stone and in the ephemeral human efforts that gave it life. Birds and insects added their own rhythms, their calls punctuating the human activity with nature's music. The sacred olive tree, central to the ritual of crowning victors, held particular significance. Its gnarled trunk and thick branches bore the weight of centuries of worship and expectation. Children circled it, mimicking the motions of athletes, unaware that they were participating in an unbroken chain of devotion and imitation that stretched back through generations. Adults paused beside it, offering quiet prayers or meditative thoughts, connecting their presence with those who had come before and those who would come after. As the sun climbed higher, the Valley of Olympia became a living organism. Every person, animal, and element contributed to its rhythm. The clatter of carts, the footsteps of travelers, the soft murmur of conversations, the calls of merchants, the songs of bards, and the chants of priests blended into a symphony of anticipation. The valley itself seemed to breathe, inhale, and exhale, moving with the collective energy of thousands gathered to witness, participate, and honor. In this moment, one could understand why the games mattered beyond competition. They were not merely displays of strength, skill, or speed. They were expressions of human ambition, devotion, culture, and memory. Every gesture, every motion, every observation was part of a grand tapestry, connecting the mortal to the divine, the present to the past, and the individual to the collective. The Altus, with its temples, altars, statues, and sacred tree, was both stage and sanctuary, offering a space where the aspirations of thousands could converge into a singular, shared experience. Night fell slowly over Olympia, and the valley transformed under torchlight. Fires dotted tents and groves, casting flickering shadows that danced across marble and bronze. Travelers settled for rest, children slept in tents or beneath trees, and the soft music of lyres and flutes continued, winding through the air. Bards and storytellers took advantage of the quiet to recount in more detail the deeds of Heracles, Pelops, Achilles, and Odysseus, immersing listeners in the epic tales that served both as inspiration and as a moral framework for the competitions to come. The first night in Olympia was a threshold, a liminal space between the journey and the games themselves. The valley, ancient and alive, absorbed every sound, every movement, every intention. The air was thick with anticipation, a silent hum that resonated in the hearts of travelers, athletes, and observers alike. And as the moon rose, casting silver light across the olive groves and the Altis, Olympia seemed to hold its breath, ready to receive the acts of courage, skill, and devotion that would soon define it for centuries. The morning sun cast long shadows across the stadium, painting the sand in shades of gold and bronze. Olympia had awakened fully now, alive with the murmurs of the crowd, the rustle of olive trees, and the distant cries of merchants calling out their wares. The air was thick with anticipation, carrying the mingled scents of sweat, dust, oil, and incense from the altars. Every traveler, every spectator, and every athlete felt the weight of what was about to unfold, the very first Olympic contests, where human effort would be measured, celebrated, and recorded for eternity. The stadium was first. A simple, straight track of packed earth, 600 feet in length, yet it carried the hopes and fears of every competitor. Athletes stretched, flexing muscles glistening with oil, toes digging into the starting grooves carved by expert hands. They shifted weight from foot to foot, breath steady, eyes fixed on the line ahead. Among them, a young runner from Elis, his name whispered among his village as a prodigy of speed, adjusted the leather straps of his sandals, feeling the sun warm the sand beneath his feet. Beside him, a taller man from Corinth bent low, a veteran of regional races, eyes narrowed in calculation. Each knew that the stadium was more than a test of swiftness, it was a measure of focus, courage, and the delicate balance of body and mind. The signal sounded, a simple gesture from the judge, a lifting of the hand, and the athletes surged forward. Sand sprayed beneath their feet, each step a precise coil and release of energy, calves and thighs working in perfect rhythm. The crowd fell silent, held in a collective breath, then erupted as the runners advanced, bodies straining, chests heaving, arms pumping. The young man from Ellis pushed every sinew to its limit, feeling wind against his face, the heat of the sun on his back, the rhythm of footfalls echoing in his ears like a drum. Behind him, the Corinthian runner adjusted his pace, conserving energy, waiting for the moment to strike, the moment when skill, instinct, and courage would converge. At the finish line, the victor's name would be carried for generations. The crowd surged with a roar as the first runner crossed, dust and sweat mixing with the exultation of success. His eyes shone with triumph, his chest heaving, and his heart pounding not only with exertion but with the knowledge that he had joined the ranks of heroes immortalized by story and song. Others crossed moments later, some stumbling, some triumphant, each imprinting their own narrative into the unfolding history of Olympia. Next came wrestling, a contest of strength, cunning, and endurance. The sand of the wrestling grounds, carefully raked and packed, became the stage for human struggle. Two men squared off, circling, feinting, probing for weakness. Muscles tensed, sweat gleamed in the sun, and the crowd leaned forward, sensing that each movement could tilt the balance toward victory or defeat. Wrestling was not only about power, it demanded strategy, patience, and the ability to read the opponent's mind, to anticipate shifts and counteractions. Every fall, every grapple, every twist of the torso carried significance. Victories were celebrated as triumphs of intellect and strength combined. Defeats, though humbling, were equally honored for the courage displayed in effort. Pancration followed, the most feared contest of all. Only biting and eye-gouging were forbidden, otherwise, men clashed with astonishing ferocity, grappling, striking, and testing limits of endurance. The combatants' bodies intertwined, a blur of motion and determination. Each strike, each lock, each maneuver was a dialogue, a conversation in movement between two wills striving for dominance. The crowd responded in a mix of gasps, cheers, and shouts, caught in the drama of human skill pushed to extremes. Pancration was as much about resilience as it was about aggression. Each man tested not only his opponent but the boundaries of his own courage and resolve. The events of the Stagion, wrestling, and pancration were interspersed with bursts of observation and reflection. The crowd was alive with commentary, discussions of technique, predictions of outcomes, and philosophical musings on the nature of excellence. Among the spectators, a philosopher from Athens noted, "Observe not only the victor, but the manner of striving. Courage, discipline, and skill define a man as much as victory." Nearby, a mother whispered to her children, "See how they endure, how they push beyond fear. This is the measure of greatness." Such reflections elevated the contests beyond mere sport. They became demonstrations of character, lessons in endurance, and celebrations of human potential. The field events followed: discus, javelin, and long jump. In the discus, athletes measured rotation, balance, and timing, spinning the disc with practiced precision to hurl it in an arc that glittered in sunlight. The javelin required strength, technique, and the calculation of trajectory, each throw slicing through the air like a spear of aspiration. The long jump, aided by halteres, transformed the earth into a stage of suspension, moments stretched as the jumper hovered in impossible flight before landing in sand with a controlled thud. Spectators tracked each motion with rapt attention, their cheers rising and falling in rhythm with the athlete's movements, creating a living, breathing wave of human energy. Athlete micro-stories enriched each event. A discus thrower from Sparta remembered training in the olive groves at dawn, imagining Heracles' mighty labors, drawing courage from myth. A long jumper from Corinth recalled the advice of his father, a former victor: "Strength is fleeting, technique is eternal." Each competitor carried with them a personal narrative intertwined with the broader tapestry of Olympia, the hopes of families, the pride of city-states, and the inspiration of mythic heroes whose stories guided their every action. Chariot races loomed as a spectacle of speed, skill, and peril. The grounds were prepared meticulously, with tracks cleared and lined, horses inspected and trained, drivers ready to demonstrate mastery over both animal and wheel. The pounding of hooves, the clatter of wheels, the dust rising in blinding clouds, and the tension of drivers leaning low, balancing precariously, created a drama unmatched by any other event. Each turn carried risk, each lap tested not only the strength and speed of the horses but the courage and cunning of their drivers. Spectators felt the thrill as if they were in the chariot themselves, heartbeats matching the rhythm of hooves, breaths held in unison with each daring maneuver. The afternoon passed in a series of contests, each layered with human struggle, triumph, and observation. Victories were celebrated with cheers and the crowning of temporary honors, defeats with consolation and reflection. The Valley of Olympia became a living organism, vibrating with the combined energy of athletes, spectators, priests, and the environment itself. Every footfall, every gesture, every motion contributed to the unfolding narrative of the first Olympic Games, transforming mere competition into a ritual of human aspiration. Evening brought reflection. Athletes cooled, stretched, and prepared mentally for the following day. Families gathered, recounting moments of brilliance, discussing strategies, and imagining what tomorrow would bring. Philosophers continued quiet debates on virtue and excellence, while musicians played softly, their melodies weaving through tents and groves, easing the tension of exertion, and preparing minds and bodies for rest. Night at Olympia was a sacred pause. Torches flickered, fires burned, and shadows danced across the valley. Children fell asleep beneath the stars or beside their parents, dreaming of contests and heroes. Bards recounted the tales of Heracles, Pelops, Achilles, and Odysseus, intertwining myth and human action. Travelers whispered stories of journeys, of victories, and defeats, of legends both observed and imagined. And the valley itself seemed to absorb every sound, every movement, and every thought, storing them in its memory, ready to become the foundation for centuries of history and legend. The contests of the first day had set the rhythm for the games. Olympia had transformed into a crucible where human ambition met divine witness, where myth guided action, and where every person, from the youngest child to the oldest philosopher, felt connected to the pulse of human achievement. The valley held its breath, anticipating the challenges of the coming days, the triumphs and defeats yet to unfold, and the stories that would be told for generations to come. The sun reached its zenith, and the Valley of Olympia shimmered under its unrelenting gaze. The chariot track, a long oval of compacted earth bordered by low embankments, awaited the arrival of its gladiators, men and horses bound by skill, courage, and the promise of glory. Horses stamped in anticipation, hooves scraping the dust, nostrils flaring, muscles coiled like springs beneath glossy coats. Drivers leaned over their wheels, reins taut, eyes narrow with concentration, hearts thundering in rhythm with the pounding of hooves and the shouts of attendants and trainers. The chariot race was unlike any other contest in the games. Speed alone would not secure victory. Balance, cunning, timing, and intuition were equally critical. A moment's misjudgment could throw wheel, chariot, and driver into a tangle of wood and blood. The spectators leaned forward along embankments, their cheers rising and falling like waves, breaths held collectively, each pulse synchronized with the thunder of hooves. Merchants paused mid-call, bards hushed their songs, and even priests at altars seemed to lean closer, drawn by the spectacle unfolding before them. As the race began, dust spiraled into the air, forming golden clouds that caught the sunlight and momentarily obscured the track. Chariots surged forward, wooden wheels creaking and splintering under strain, horses straining at their harnesses. Drivers shouted commands, arms pumping to maintain control, leaning sharply into turns with the precision of acrobats. Every lap carried the danger of catastrophe. Every maneuver demanded instinct and courage. The young charioteer from Corinth, a boy of barely 20 summers, felt sweat stinging his eyes as he leaned low, urging his team forward, recalling stories of Pelops' fateful race, visualizing the finish line as though it were a divine presence demanding mastery. Crowds roared as chariots jostled side by side, the dust swirling in clouds like living spirits. One driver lost control, wheels tilting precariously, spectators gasped, the air thick with tension. The horse team, sensing imbalance, surged with extra effort, recovering just enough to avoid disaster. In that instant, the crowd experienced a mix of fear and awe, understanding that victory and calamity were separated by a single heartbeat, a single decision, a single flick of rein or tilt of body. Meanwhile, the valley prepared for night. Fires were lit across groves and tents, smoke spiraling toward the heavens. Musicians plucked lyres, flutes sang, and the low hum of conversation filled the air, mingling with the scent of roasting lamb, herbs, and fresh bread. Children ran along paths illuminated by flickering torchlight, their laughter piercing the melodic rhythm of instruments and the murmur of human activity. The festival had begun, not only as a celebration of athleticism but as a cultural and spiritual experience, where myth, music, ritual, and human interaction converged. Bards and storytellers moved among the crowd, recounting the tales of Heracles' 12 labors in rich detail, his battle with the Nemean lion, the slaying of the Lernaean hydra, the capture of the Serenian hind. Each tale was rendered with dramatic pause and evocative imagery. The audience could almost hear the lions roar, smell the blooded grass, feel the tension of Heracles' sinews straining against impossible foes. The stories were not merely entertainment. They were instruction, moral guidance, and inspiration, reminding all present that courage, strength, and cunning were inseparable elements of true excellence. Pelops' chariot race was recounted next, with emphasis on the divine interference that had shaped destiny. Children listened wide-eyed, imagining the trembling horses, the divine whispers, the treacherous turns, and the sheer will required to triumph. Adults reflected on the implications, that life itself was a course with hazards, that victory required skill, courage, and sometimes favor beyond one's control. The story intertwined naturally with the events just witnessed, the chariot race at Olympia echoing the myth in a tangible, visceral way. Meanwhile, Achilles' swiftness and wrath were described with meticulous detail, the bards recounting the duel with Hector, the fury on the battlefield, the strategic brilliance, and the human flaws that marked even the greatest heroes. Young athletes leaned in, absorbing lessons in courage, strategy, and the consequences of unchecked emotion. Their minds and bodies were being trained not only through physical exertion but through story, embedding patterns of excellence, resilience, and tactical intelligence. Odysseus' cunning, perseverance, and wit were next, tales of long journeys, perilous seas, and encounters with gods and monsters. Each retelling emphasized patience, adaptability, and moral choice. The crowd, now gathered fully around fires, listened intently, some imagining themselves as travelers on distant seas, some mapping their own lives to the lessons embedded in myth. The valley itself seemed to participate, the tree swaying in rhythm with spoken words, the river reflecting torchlight as if eager to capture the lessons of human endeavor. As night deepened, communal feasts began. Families, travelers, and athletes shared bread, roasted meats, figs, and wine. Conversations were rich with recounting the day's events, observations of technique, debates about strategy, and reflections on heroism. Merchants continued to offer wares, their voices softened by the calm of evening, while children fell asleep or mimicked athletic motions near their parents. Music provided a steady, gentle rhythm, allowing laughter, discussion, and storytelling to coexist in a harmonious tapestry. Philosophers, seated beneath groves illuminated by torchlight, engaged in quiet debate. One raised a question: is the measure of excellence in victory, or in the courage to compete? Another replied, pointing towards sleeping athletes and the calm river, true excellence encompasses both. Strength without wisdom is hollow, effort without reflection is incomplete. These discussions, subtle yet profound, underscored the purpose of the games, not merely to honor strength or speed but to cultivate virtue, wisdom, and communal understanding. Throughout the night, the valley remained alive, each sensory detail amplified by quiet observation. The smell of herbs and roasting food mingled with smoke and cool night air. The distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, and the gentle lap of the river combined with music, conversation, and laughter. Tents were softly illuminated, shadows flickering across faces and walls, creating an intimate interplay of light and dark that mirrored the themes of struggle and triumph, victory and reflection. The sacred olive tree, once again, became a focal point. Athletes and observers alike paused beneath it, some offering silent prayers, others in quiet reflection. Its ancient branches seemed to reach toward the heavens, bridging the mortal and divine, echoing the stories just told and those yet to be enacted. Children circled it, playing games of skill and mimicry, learning the rhythms of motion, competition, and reverence that would define their lives. By the middle of the night, a calm settled over Olympia. The valley was still alive, yet in a reflective, meditative way. Fires burned low, the river gurgled softly, and a gentle breeze whispered through olive groves. The first full day of contests had passed, chariot races had thrilled and terrified, music had soothed and inspired, and stories of heroes had enriched both mind and spirit. Every individual in the valley carried the memory of action, narrative, and sensory experience, weaving their own threads into the fabric of the games. The valley itself seemed to hum with accumulated energy. Stones and trees, river and grove, tents and temples, all bore witness to the events, storing the collective memory. Each participant, observer, and traveler contributed to this living record, ensuring that the experience of Olympia was more than ephemeral. It was history in motion, myth made tangible, and human aspiration observed and celebrated by all. As dawn approached, the valley prepared for the next day. Athletes rested, bodies and minds absorbing lessons of exertion, triumph, and strategy. Families awoke quietly, children stretching and observing, merchants prepared their wares anew, and the sacred spaces readied themselves for ritual and competition. The stories of Heracles, Pelops, Achilles, and Odysseus remained vivid in memory, guiding behavior and inspiring effort. Music began again as the first light of day filtered through olive leaves, signaling that Olympia's heartbeat had not paused but continued, steady, eternal, and resonant. Night at Olympia was not merely a pause between contests, it was a full expression of culture, ritual, education, and community. It showcased the interweaving of human ambition with myth, music with story, body with spirit, and the mortal with the divine. The chariot races of the afternoon and the fires of the evening created a dynamic narrative that would echo for generations, ensuring that every act, every tale, and every lesson of that night became an inseparable part of the ongoing story of Olympia. Dawn broke over Olympia with a gentle brilliance, scattering light across the valley, gilding olive groves, marble statues, and the sacred river with a luminous glow. The air was crisp and scented with herbs, smoke, and the lingering fragrance of incense from the altars. The valley had awakened fully, alive with movement, voices, and anticipation. Today was the final day of the games, the culmination of effort, skill, courage, and aspiration. Every individual present felt the weight of history pressing upon them, the knowledge that each step, each throw, each sprint could echo across time. Athletes rose early, bodies taut and poised, muscles stretched and flexed under the early light. Some meditated beneath trees, invoking the favor of Zeus or Athena, silently asking for strength, focus, and protection. Others practiced quietly, testing javelin flight, perfecting the spin of the discus, or pacing themselves along the stadion, feeling the rhythm of their stride. Coaches and mentors observed carefully, offering measured advice, guiding each movement with experience and intuition. Parents watched, hearts tight with hope and fear, understanding that the crowning of victors was a communal honor as much as an individual achievement. The first contests of the day unfolded with deliberate ceremony. The stadium was lined with athletes from multiple city-states, each eager to claim glory. The race began with a signal, and bodies surged forward in synchronized determination, sand spraying beneath rapid footfalls. Each step carried not only personal ambition but the weight of family, city, and cultural legacy. Spectators gasped and cheered, their voices blending into a living chorus of human energy, resonating across hills, groves, and riverbanks. Dust and sunlight danced together as runners strained toward the finish, muscles trembling, lungs burning, hearts pounding with exertion and expectation. Wrestling followed, and then pancration, each contest demonstrating not just physical skill but strategic intelligence, mental endurance, and sheer courage. Athletes grappled, struck, and countered with precision, their bodies telling stories of years of training and discipline. The crowd responded with a mixture of awe and encouragement, witnessing both triumphs and near disasters. Here, as in all contests, the line between victory and defeat was razor-thin, determined by preparation, instinct, and the willingness to risk everything in pursuit of excellence. Meanwhile, the sacred rituals continued. Priests moved with solemn purpose, offering libations, tending fires, and observing sacrifices. Wine was poured, grain scattered, and prayers uttered in cadence with the events, connecting each contest to the divine. The sacred olive tree stood central, its branches swaying gently in the morning breeze, ready to crown those who would demonstrate the pinnacle of human ability. Every act, from the physical to the ceremonial, was a reminder that Olympia was a convergence of mortal effort and divine witness, where human ambition met spiritual significance. The final races, including the pentathlon, tested versatility, endurance, and strategy. Athletes sprinted, hurled javelins, leapt for distance, wrestled, and demonstrated skill across multiple disciplines. Each movement was precise, measured, yet imbued with the raw intensity of competition. Spectators traced each motion with rapt attention, analyzing technique, marveling at coordination, and cheering acts of exceptional skill. These events were not isolated feats but a composite demonstration of the ideal human form, blending strength, speed, skill, and intellect into a single performance. As the day progressed, victors began to emerge. Olive wreaths were prepared, their silvery leaves shimmering in sunlight. Winners were honored ceremonially, hands raised, faces radiant with triumph. The crowd cheered, not merely for personal success, but in recognition of excellence itself. Parents wept, athletes embraced, and the valley seemed to vibrate with the resonance of achievement, courage, and communal pride. Each victor's story was immediately woven into the fabric of Olympia, their name destined to be remembered through song, story, and legend. Even in victory, reflection was present. Philosophers and poets noted not only the physical accomplishment but the character revealed in effort, resilience, and courage. One scholar remarked, pointing toward a triumphant athlete, "Observe not only what has been achieved, but the manner of striving. Here lies true virtue, a lesson for all who witness." Children absorbed these lessons quietly, the patterns of excellence and dedication imprinting on their minds, forming the next generation of citizens, athletes, and thinkers who would carry the ideals of Olympia forward. As the final contests concluded, Olympia settled into a reflective calm. The valley, now crowded with participants, spectators, merchants, and priests, exhaled collectively. Fires burned, music filled the air, and storytelling resumed with renewed vigor. Tales of Heracles, Pelops, Achilles, and Odysseus were retold with heightened drama, linked seamlessly to the events just witnessed. Bards emphasized courage, strategy, endurance, and the moral implications of human action, blending myth and contemporary achievement into a continuous narrative that transcended time. The valley's physical beauty was matched by its emotional intensity. Olive trees cast long shadows in the afternoon sun, rivers reflected ripples of gold, and marble statues seemed to gaze knowingly upon the assembled crowd. Each person present, from the youngest child to the oldest philosopher, felt connected to the broader story unfolding, aware that they were participants in something enduring. Every cheer, every whispered observation, every act of devotion became part of Olympia's memory, etched into the collective consciousness of those present and those who would hear the tale in future generations. Evening approached, and the crowning of victors reached its ceremonial peak. Priests placed olive wreaths upon heads, the silvery leaves a tangible symbol of divine approval and human accomplishment. Victors offered thanks to the gods, bowing and raising hands, their voices carrying prayers of gratitude across the valley. Families embraced, spectators applauded, and the air was thick with a mixture of joy, reverence, and awe. The ceremonies linked mortal achievement to spiritual recognition, reinforcing the cultural and religious significance of the Games. Night fell over Olympia, and the valley transformed once more. Fires illuminated tents, groves, and statues, casting flickering shadows that danced across marble and earth. Musicians played softly, bards recited tales, and the murmurs of reflection mingled with laughter and conversation. The sacred olive tree, central to all ceremony, stood silently, witness to the culmination of effort, courage, and human aspiration. The river murmured gently, carrying the sounds of celebration and contemplation downstream, as if ensuring that Olympia's story would flow beyond its own valley. The final day was not only a conclusion but a transition. Olympia had witnessed the birth of heroes, the exercise of virtue, the culmination of skill, and the affirmation of culture. Athletes, spectators, and priests departed with memories, lessons, and stories that would ripple across Greece. The Games themselves, though concluded, became a living tradition, a standard against which courage, skill, and human endeavor would be measured for generations. In the quiet after celebration, as stars emerged in the clear night sky, the valley of Olympia held a stillness both sacred and eternal. The stones, the groves, the river, and the altars seemed to breathe with the echoes of human effort. Every footstep, every cheer, every motion from the past days remained imprinted in memory, forming a foundation for future games, for future storytellers, and for the enduring cultural legacy of Greece itself. The games had achieved more than the victory of individuals. They had unified city-states, inspired generations, and demonstrated that human aspiration, guided by courage, discipline, and reverence for the divine, could transcend mortality. Olympia, once a valley of quiet groves and flowing rivers, had become a living monument to excellence, honor, and the enduring power of shared human endeavor. As dawn approached on the following day, travelers prepared to leave, carrying with them the stories, lessons, and experiences of Olympia. Merchants packed wares, children stretched tired limbs, athletes reflected on victories and defeats, and philosophers whispered final contemplations. And yet, the valley remained, silent yet alive, ready to receive the next generation, the next story, the next manifestation of courage, skill, and aspiration. The memory of the games, etched into every stone, tree, and ripple of the river, would endure, a testament to the intersection of human and divine, of myth and reality, of effort and glory. Olympia's legacy was not confined to a single moment. It stretched across time, an enduring celebration of human potential, a place where stories were born, legends forged, and the spirit of excellence elevated beyond the reach of mortality. Those who had walked its paths, witnessed its contests, and participated in its rituals carried forward the lessons learned, that courage, skill, discipline, and reverence for the greater whole were the pillars of enduring achievement. The games were over, but their story, like the river that ran through the valley, flowed endlessly onward, shaping culture, inspiring generations, and preserving the essence of human aspiration for all time.